Hello Kaiju fans, welcome back to the Kaiju World Order. I am MM, and this is Monster of the Week, where I will talk about a monster that has been voted on by members of the Kaiju Hugbox Discord server. And this week's winner is everybody's favorite Trifibian monster. He is the master of the land, the sea, and the air. He is Varan, originating from Toho's 1958 opus, aptly called Varan. Let's take a look at this wonderful kaiju. Officially, Varan is a prehistoric monster very much akin to kaiju like Anguirus and Rodan, but he was also worshipped by a small village as a deity. He was believed to bring protection and also all the good stuff that would come with worshipping a god for farmers. So when some not tourists, but outsiders visited the mountain, specifically scientists, looking for a very rare species of butterfly, they disturbed Varan, the mountain god. The monster eventually rose up and proved its existence. It demolished parts of the mountain. Eventually, defense forces were called in, and the movie quickly turned into a wannabe Godzilla movie. Now, the special effects were very great. E.G. Tsuburaya was at the top of his game here, and I will always argue that the village effects, the mountains, these were some of his best work. I would even say some of it was better than the original 54. Unfortunately, the effects are really all this movie has going for it. It is kind of boring, but eventually the monster does have some cool scenes. Varan thrashes the self-defense forces. Eventually he heads out to sea. He has a battle with the Navy, has some really cool interactions with jet fighters and bombers, and then eventually makes landfall at an airport where he is tricked into eating bombs, and then the bombs explode in his belly, and then he just wanders back into the ocean and vanishes beneath the water. Varan is a very simple kaiju. He has a very cool design though. It's classy. Based very heavily on monitor lizards. The name Varan even is based on the scientific name for monitor lizards, Varanidae, which I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of that because I can barely pronounce certain kaiju's names correctly anymore. Varan has one cool feature that really makes him stand out though, and that is his gliding. Varan has membranes between his arms and legs that allow him to glide through the air. He only does this once in the movie, and it's not a very important scene. In fact, the American edit cuts this scene out entirely. And speaking of the American edit, released in 1962, this is where Varan officially became Varan the Unbelievable. Now, they did cut out the gliding scene, they did change up some scenes, they introduced a new American actor and character to pretty much do what Raymond Burr did in Godzilla King of the Monsters, where this movie also tried adapting it the same way. Neither movie is very spectacular or special in the long run, but again, Varan as a monster and the scenes of him are E.G. Tsuburaya at his best. The American cut changes up scenes, and Varan is no longer just awoken by trespassers. He is specifically awoken by, as the scientist, the American actor, trying to use an experimental process to pretty much remove the salt content and minerals from Salt Lake, which angers Varan, and then the plot of the Japanese movie pretty much plays out till the very end, and they don't really go into what beats Varan. We just see a big explosion, and then he crawls back into the sea. The end. This would be the end of Varan for some time. He had a very brief appearance in Destroy All Monsters. It is a blink and you miss it cameo at the very end, along with on one of the monitors on Monster Island or Monsterland, whichever you want to call it. And Varan was then pretty much retired. He popped up in some video games in the early 90s and late 80s, specifically like Monster of Monsters, where he was given this funky coloring of purple. Then he was also in, of course, Godzilla Unleashed in 2007. He was my main character, my main fighter in that game. His gliding tackles, and of course they had to give him an energy beam, which I don't know why they had that mentality back then, but Pipeworks did. But Varan was a pretty cool monster all the way up until that point. Varan's very last media appearance has been in Godzilla Battle Line, where he is a very useful unit that you can use to deploy several spaces above a normal unit, and he has some pretty decent health and attack. Early in the 1970s, Varan was also considered to appear in the movie that would eventually evolve into Godzilla vs. Gigan. Here, Varan would fill a similar role as Anguirus does in Gigan alongside Rodan, where they would be teaming up with Godzilla to face Gigan, King Ghidorah, and a new monster called Moog or Moj. I've seen it pronounced both ways. This story ultimately was scrapped. It was way too large for what Toho could do at the time, and it was shrunken down. Varan was cut, replaced with Anguirus, as he had a perfectly fine suit left over from Destroy All Monsters, and the rest is history. In 1995, as the Heisei era was coming to a close and the American Godzilla remake was looming, Varan was briefly considered to be the last monster for Godzilla to face at this point. Unlike his 2001 proposed appearance, this Varan was going to be the total opposite. This Varan was going to be an apocalyptic doombringer that would be the last monster to face Godzilla, akin to how Destroya did. Thankfully, this concept did not go very far. I don't think Varan works as a monster that would be to that level. Not without completely overhauling almost everything about him, from design, from powers to origins. At that point, just make a new monster, which thankfully Toho did, and thus we got Destroya. In 2001, of course, everybody knows the original plan for GMK originally included Anguirus and Varan. Varan would be the main heroic kaiju, much like how Ghidorah is in the GMK that we got. Similarly to Ghidorah, this Varan would be the one to save Yuri at the end of the movie. It would have the gliding flight and be able to generate some sort of shockwave in its attacks. But as we all know, this Varan never actually appeared, and the cast of GMK was turned into Mothra and King Ghidorah. But thankfully, a little bit of this Varan lives on in GMK Ghidorah, with the facial features of Varan actually being given to King Ghidorah. Following Godzilla Tokyo SOS and prior to the production of Final Wars, there was sketch artwork done for a possible third Kaiju film, which legend states that it would have been Godzilla versus an army of cyborg kaiju, including Varan. This, however, has been discredited as just being one of the people behind the scenes, pretty much just goofing off on a what could be a final Kaiju movie. It was never going to actually be Final Wars. In the 90s, he did appear in Mark Saraceni's novels, specifically Godzilla 2000. This version of Varan was a lot more carnivorous. He was devouring people to the point where one character would actually fall into a pile of his poop, and there were half-digested human remains in it, along with skeletons and so on. This Varan also kept his gliding ability from the Showa era, only Mark Saraceni explained it where he was filling up with gas, and this is also how the human forces ended up defeating it, by igniting the gas that he was using to float and glide. While in the novel Godzilla 2000, Varan was believed to have been destroyed by an airstrike while he was in flight. However, he was planned to come back in Mark Saraceni's Godzilla and the Lost Continent. This book, however, was never published, so details of it remain scarce. I did an interview with Mark Saraceni unveiling some of his plans for it, and Varan was just another one of the monsters that was supposed to be on the Lost Continent when it arose, along with the likes of Manda and Batra. Along with the Saraceni novels, Varan also popped up in the Scott Jensen novels. I might be butchering the pronunciation of his last name. In these novels, which are a bit more lighthearted compared to the other ones, Varan is pretty much just another monster. Godzilla meets him along with a bunch of other monsters while they're journeying to Monster Island. And then he would pop up in another novel later on, Godzilla vs. the Space Monster, where, if I'm remembering right, he fights King Ghidorah, or he at least encounters him. It's been a long time since I read them books. They are, as I said, more young adult novels. Additionally, in the 1990s, alongside the Scott Jensen and Mark Saraceni novels, Varan pops up in some of the children's books, Godzilla on Monster Island, and Who's Afraid of Godzilla, and I believe he's even in Godzilla Likes to Roar. In the first one there, Godzilla on Monster Island, he, along with Anguirus, find the egg that would eventually hatch into Mothra at the very end. And then in the other two in the other two books, which are amazingly illustrated by Bob Eggleton, Varan is one of the monsters that runs away from Godzilla and is terrified of him until Godzilla proves that he's also friendly by helping rid the monsters of Gigan and Megalon, who started bullying them after Godzilla got tired of being shunned. Varan would also go on to now make appearances in Godzibon, and then also a bit more recently as well, he started appearing in IDW's Godzilla comics. Varan popped up in Rulers of Earth, where Matt Frank and Jeff Zornow did a tremendous job in bringing this monster back from the dead, pretty much. Varan had some great fights. He appears and fights Rodan. Later on, he again joins forces with Godzilla. And Varan has since been used on other features, including the Skate or Die comic, where Varan is actually the main antagonist. This is actually pretty cool because normally those type of roles are reserved for the typical King Ghidorahs and Space Godzillas and stuff like that. So seeing a monster like Varan given a main antagonist role while also not being the type of role where he's going to destroy the entire planet, that is a very nice change of pace. However, my favorite version of the IDW Varan has to be the Godzilla in Hell variant. This Varan is actually a demonic entity that is plaguing Godzilla. There are demonic versions of Rodan and Anguirus also. And Bob Eggleton, without a doubt, the GOAT of Godzilla artwork, did the artwork for the comic, and it is just stellar. I recommend it all the way. The production of Varan itself was almost cursed. Really, it could be its own movie and some sort of documentary, drama, comedy. But Varan was initially a joint production between Toho and then at the time ABC. And this was supposed to be a made-for-TV movie for American audiences following the popularity of kaiju movies in the US, such as Godzilla and Rodan. However, when backing of this movie fell through, Toho decided to continue on with production, and instead of making a made-for-TV movie, they shifted gears and decided to just put it into theaters. The problem is that the movie, the scenes already being completed, were in black and white, and at the time, couldn't really go back and just snap your fingers and turn a black and white film into color. So the rest of the movie was also filmed in black and white and released years after Toho had started doing color movies such as Rodan and the Mysterians and the Battle in Outer Space. So Varan's success was marred from the very beginning. He would never go on to become a staple kaiju like Godzilla and Rodan and Mothra, simply because of the backstage drama in its production. I do like to think of an alternate timeline where everything with Varan went right, and we could be living in a day and age where instead of Godzilla being the number one, it could have been Varan. Remember, Varan was supposed to release in the late 50s, well before King Kong vs. Godzilla. All it would have taken is for Varan to be a smash success on US televisions, for Varan to appear in King Kong vs. Godzilla opposed to Godzilla himself, which would then launch the career of Varan as the actual King of the Monsters instead of Godzilla. That is a weird thing to think about, but that is what could have happened if Varan's initial production didn't fall apart. As for merchandise, Varan is surprisingly popular. He has always gotten merchandise, it seems. He's had classic figures from Bullmark all the way up to Marmot. X Plus has done several statues. I happen to have one of them. Even Trendmasters back in the 90s was planning on a widely produced Varan, which would have been a redesigned, giving him a far more sinister, lizard-like, and, well, extreme 90s look than Varan has had. Recently won a Bandai poll a few years ago by the fans, in which he was finally giving a proper movie monster series figure, a regular Bandai figure, in which he has never had. YMSF was one of the first companies to do a standard Varan figure. Their Varan is based on the prop from 1968's Destroy All Monsters, so you can actually have figures of both versions of Varan on your shelf. Varan has had Gashapon figures, he's had candy toys, so a lot of Varan merchandise does exist if you know where to look for it. He even has a festival exclusive figure that is much like a Reveltech. I have been after this figure for a long time. I used to actually think it was just a custom until being corrected. This Varan figure is one of the holy grails that I have been after, and Varan's legacy to this day continues to live on. where he has already been used as the basis for Godzilla Ultima's second form in Singular Point, Godzilla Amphibia. And long before that, Varan's roar was also recycled for numerous monsters afterward. All the way from Baragon, it was adjusted for Megalon, Gorosaurus got it. Tons upon tons of Ultraman Kaiju use it even to this day. So that classic roar was originally done for Varan. As the first Triphibian Kaiju, Varan still remains unique to this day. There has been some copies here and there, which are played more along the lines of homages, specifically like Paraglar and Ultraman Max. Varan, I feel, should make a comeback at some point. He is a very unique kaiju. I don't think he should have a starring role, but I would love to see him, if not, like, just hanging out in the background somewhere. He'd make great appearances in, like, an anime, if they would ever do a Monster of the Week style Godzilla anime. With all that said and done now, hope you all learned one or two things about this awesome kaiju. If not, well, there's always next time. You can come to the Kaiju Hugbox and vote for the next Monster of the Week, which I will then post up on here. And until next time, Kaiju fans, peace out, and Minya, take it away.
Godzilla says you should like and subscribe.